Welcome to our latest Hippocratic Adventures chat. This is where we talk about everything related to practicing medicine abroad. I'm your host, Dr. Ashwini Bapat. I'm a US trained palliative care doctor now living in Portugal. If you want to learn more, make sure to join our completely free email newsletter. This is where we share international job opportunities, inspiring stories, and tips and strategies to help you move abroad. Sign up at hippocraticadventures.com/subscribe. Today, I'm here with Dr. Adora Otiji. She's a family medicine physician. She spent her childhood in rural Nigeria. She moved to the US with her family to further her education, attending college at the University of Maryland and med school at Emory, where she also obtained a master's in public health. After completing her family medicine residency at University of Maryland Medical Center, she joined her father's practice in the DC suburbs. Seeing the need for physician receptors in the community, Adora welcomes students at different levels of training, from high school students considering medicine to medical students ready for graduation. To further her passion for medical education, especially for students underrepresented in medicine, Adora and her family moved to Barbados to work at Ross University School of Medicine as an assistant professor in the Department of Clinical Foundation. Of course, we're going to talk all about that transition to Barbados, but before we get started, smash that subscribe button, sit back, and enjoy. So Adora, tell me your story. It's actually pretty cool. It's super unique. You grew up partially in rural Nigeria before moving to the US, and now you're in Barbados. So how did that happen? Like, what made you go from working in the DC suburbs to Barbados?
Yeah, I guess love of travel, having that cultural experience as you shared with my intro. I did spend my childhood, and my husband and I, again in Nigeria, grew up there. That's where our roots are, and I think we always wanted to we love living in the US, and we have our family, our girls have been raised there. They're 12 and 13 now. Um, and but wanted them to have a different experience as well. Travel, obviously vacations, etc. But being able to live in a place, I think, is a really unique, enriching experience. So that was definitely a big motivator for us, is having our children experience something like that. Um, and I definitely am a big fan of, like I said, travel. I watch way too much HGTV travel shows. And so I think, when all the pieces, it's something we've kind of mulled over, not really knowing how it would happen or in what form. Do you just keep working and then retire and then, and then move, which I was like, ooh, right? I mean, by then the kids are grown, and it's kind of anti the point, I think. I want it to be part of the experience. And so um, I think what really gave that push was COVID.
Hmm.
Yeah, COVID. COVID forced the pause on everyone. And with the pause, the time to think, reflect, because it's just, you're constantly going, the hustle, working, as I was running a practice, and super busy, just go. And I think, as horrible as COVID was and all the things that happened with it, for me and my family, that definitely was the opportunity to stop, think, reflect, pivot. And so looking at various opportunities, um, the stars kind of aligned with this one. I had even considered going to New Zealand, some family medicine, and that definitely seems to be a big need there. And folks seem to be able to transition without too much administrative burdens, etc. But of course, that's
Yeah.
really far. So, but again, seriously considered it, kind of other opportunities, but the Barbados fit for several reasons because obviously geographically, right, close to the US. My family's all in the US, so we all immigrated in terms of nuclear family to the US. Still have family in Nigeria, but my closest family is in America. Um, and then so ease of travel. We wanted definitely I wanted a tropical lifestyle, the warm weather. Um, I'd been to Barbados before. I was quite familiar actually with the island. One of my best friends is her family's from Barbados. And so she travels back and forth and actually my best friend from medical school. And so over the decades have come to know the island. And so, Ross was initially not on Barbados. They were on a different island in the Caribbean, yeah, in Dominica. So they've been around for like over 30 years. And with even earlier, 2017, there was this massive hurricane that unfortunately wiped out most of the island of Dominica. And also, I think, helped to kind of force um, but anyway, the university moved to Barbados. Um, and then, again, with my practice, as you mentioned, the intro, most programs are always looking for community preceptors. I don't think that's unique to Ross. I think honestly, every institution that I'm aware of, they're always looking for community preceptors, folks to send medical students to. And so I've always been able to be a source for that. I do think it's super helpful for folks interested in medicine, young learners to see outpatient medicine, which is where medicine exists, even though most of our training, I can't speak for you, but I know for me, most of my training was inside the hospital, like 80, 90%, right? And then, but real world works a completely different way. So I was always kind of, and being that I had my own practice, I could do that. I didn't need permission from anyone to be able to say, yes, you can come and shadow. I mean, other than the patient, of course, giving their consent and permission and blessing, which they almost always did. And so all these things, like I said, kind of aligned, and I reached out, kind of reached out. Was there an opportunity? Um, Again, not being in formal academia, right? I was coming from a straight family medicine um, kind of gig practice. Um, and yeah, there was an opportunity. So we took it.
Amazing. So where were you kind of in life, in your career, when you started reaching out and looking for a position in Barbados? Like how many years out of training were you? Um, it sounds like you were leaving the practice in DC that you were in charge of. So can you tell us more?
Yeah. Yeah. So okay, so I finished residency in 2008, and then had more or less been working, just same, got a job working, primarily urgent care. A couple years, started working, as you mentioned. My dad had already started a practice in the area, so moved over to that more part time, but then essentially just took it over. And devoted to that full time. So I would say maybe about 10 years in, I think was when I was like, okay, right? Because it's like you need time to get comfortable, established, and sure of yourself. We work so hard to get the not just the MD, but that confidence and skill set to be able to go out and say, I am a doctor. I know my craft. I know, my lane, right? Family medicine. I'm comfortable with what I know, what I don't know. Um, and so I think that was, and then of course child rearing and some other things kind of thrown in there. So I would say while in the back of my head I always had the idea of having this international experience, life, travel, in medical school, undergrad, et cetera. I did quite a bit of travel and research type activities. I did my master's in international health. Like I was always had that in the back of my mind, but I would say at least for a solid 10 years, there was no, like, I didn't even think of it or kind of flicker. So probably around that time was when 10 years in, I started to, okay, it's either, continue to do this, which was perfectly fine. And I did enjoy it and it was fulfilling and serving a need, or is there more?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's a really common question that a lot of physicians ask themselves at some point. Is this it, or is there more for me? And I think that's so beautiful to hear kind of how you came to that point. So when you then, so there actually wasn't it sounds like there wasn't an advertised position at Ross. You like emailed them to reach out, or how did that happen? Because I want to hear about that as well. People assume you got to just look for advertised positions. So,
Right. I agree. I think because the leap was not, again, not being in academia or art. So no, I think, I would have students come and do their rotations and, their clerkships and I don't know if I've talked, if I talked about, so I have students come and do their clerkship rotations, but I didn't really put too much thought as to, moving to the island per se. I think when the idea of that really started to develop, um, I think, yeah, the students probably did mention, yeah, they do have like small group sessions that they do, again, with standardized patients and, kind of that more problem-based learning. And again, I even way back when, in medical school, I remember that we started to do a couple sessions of those, and those were always really interesting. We would have music, again, led by a clinician, one of the MDs, and, then I think we would all sit down at a table and just go through a case. Like I remember like a DK8 case, right? Like a very classic kind of example of, pulling in all the different, your pathophys and your biochem and all of that. Um, so I I did reach out. Yeah, I did reach out to them. I was the person that was coordinating, the family medicine clerkship in the area, on behalf of the school. I was like, hey, you know, um, I like what I'm doing. It's interesting. Is there opportunity for more? And then he put me in touch with the school in Barbados. Um, Actually, at the time they were in Dominica still. Could like look back through my emails and um, the lady, and then she pointed me to their website, right? Like this is where you go to look.
yeah,
This is where the opportunity is posted. And so yes, so that definitely helped a lot. And then also, I think what really, really made, because you could look at something and still, especially when it's not, at least for me, medicine was very prescriptive, right? Like you go to, you undergrad, and then you take your MCATs, and then you go to medical school, and after medical school you go to residency, and after residency, like is just, this is the path and you follow it. And then so me looking at, you know an offering or a job position, for some of the positions that they had, I'm like, I don't know what's a faculty, what's an instructor, what's an assistant professor or associate professor, or what, I'm like, I don't know. Do I qualify for any of this? Should I even bother? And so what really, really moved it was my really good friend that I'd mentioned earlier. She had looked into it. She's a pediatrician, awesome pediatrician in Atlanta. And so had actually had a little bit more conversations, and they were like, it is viable. It is a viable option that even coming from a purely clinical background, you would be a candidate for this position. So she ultimately, decided not to pursue it for other reasons. But I think that was what gave me the courage to actually, hit the send button, um, and uh, and wait.
amazing.
And wait.
So
It took a while.
you actually heard about this opportunity kind of through the students you were precepting in some ways. That was your
Yeah,
connection.
yeah, yeah. Through the students,
Yeah.
Um, And it, I think it was just like little whispers here, like a thread here, a thread there. Um, when I reached out to the faculty member that was coordinating in the area, again, he didn't actually have necessarily, I don't think he may have been a student, a graduate from a long time ago. Or so he wasn't 100% sure either, but then he put me in contact with someone, yeah, exactly, that was on island and was able to give me a little bit more information.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so in how long have you lived in Barbados now?
So this was in September finally of 21.
Okay.
So
So
3 years.
3 years. Amazing.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
in making that transition, did you then officially leave the practice you were at in DC? It was your dad's practice, right? So what happened there?
Yeah, yeah. So that was tricky and difficult. And I think when we decided, I figured I'd do a 12-month sabbatical. That was my plan. I think that was at that point, my father had of all intents, is pretty much retired from the practice. And so, it was me. I did have some nurse practitioners working alongside as well, but I made the decision. I said I would do 12 months. We would have this experience with the family. So I hired a locums. You kind of made all the, plans and financial decisions for that. Um, and then as we coming here, staying here was positive.
Yeah.
The positive definitely added up, and we wanted to extend. So I knew I was not going to be able to maintain. So I would still travel back and forth um, to the practice, and I was very much in touch and involved. And like I said, this was still, residual dregs of kind of COVID and restrictions, and maybe a little bit more flexibilities with telemed, et cetera. But I think once things became clear that I wasn't coming back, and um, at least not in 12 months, then we started to look for how, someone to take over the practice. And so ultimately we did find that.
Okay.
So, little pros and cons definitely with having to let that go, but knowing that I wouldn't be there in the capacity that I know that the patients needed and deserved. So I had to let that go.
Yeah. And so now you've transitioned actually into more of a teaching role, right? More of a non-clinical.
Hmm.
So you don't have a family medicine practice in Barbados, and
Hmm.
your role, it sounds like it's more teaching medical students, doing problem-based learning, group teaching, things like that. So what was that transition like, going from seeing patients day to day on a daily basis, in and out, I'm sure 8 hours, whatever hours a day, to teaching?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, it was it's still something I'm processing.
Yeah.
Right, but it's good because you're talking about what you know and what you did. Of course, as the years kind of go by, you're like, well, it was 2 years ago, or 3 years ago, or 4 years ago. Versus I think initially it was pretty easy to like, okay, I'm a doctor, but I'm just here teaching for now, right? But I'm gonna go back to the doctorate very soon. And and also, again, the students hearing that and being able to identify with this is what the other, not what I want to be, but what people around me are going to be. Maybe some of my colleagues are going to look like this person in front of me talking to me.
Yeah.
So the transition was easy. I will say, easier than I thought. Let me put it that way, right? Had to, unlike I had gotten to a point in my career where I could just literally get up and just enter the office, right? And like you haven't done it for over a decade, you kind of, I'm like, I pretty much know how this day is going to go, right? There's not a lot of planning or preparation, or you more or less know what's going to happen. Versus this was, yeah, all new. It was all new. So there was definitely, for sure, administrative, learning all the technologies, and so yeah, I can talk the talk. But just like with anything else, with medicine, for us, it's the EMR and the charting, and some of those other metrics and things like that that drive us crazy. But yeah, there's that whole other side too here, right? Having to learn how they do things. So just because you have a way that you practice, as we know, medicine is not, right, one cloth, and and especially in these foundational years, this is, a lot of emphasis on just standardization and trying to kind of keep that uniform message in the beginning. Obviously, as the students, again, go through their clerkships, their rotations, their residencies, they'll keep to kind of changing and refining their unique style. So there was definitely, yes, some, conformity, some change, some growth, some learning that needed to happen. Um, but I learned it. I've learned a ton, though, I will say. I have learned a lot that I think will, and I I would like to resume my clinical practice in some fashion or form, et cetera. And I think definitely this experience will make me even a better clinician.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely
Mhm.
think. And in this transition, how did I'm kind of curious to hear, as someone who immigrated from Nigeria to the US, where it sounds like your parents still are, to then move to Barbados. How did your parents react to that? Because I feel like my parents moved from the US, from India to the US, and then for me to then move to Portugal, they were not, it took them a while. They weren't the happiest initially. And you were taking the two grandkids away as well, similarly to what we did. So I'm actually kind of curious to hear for myself almost. How did your parents react?
Yeah, no, the immigrant story. It's because it's like, wait, what? Um, And I think my parents were actually okay, not because my parents are they they can't talk because I'm like, y'all, so my mother's Jamaican, should add more to the story, and my dad is Nigerian, and they met and fell in love in DC
Okay.
and moved to Nigeria, where, like I said, we grew up, etc., and then moved back later on. So I don't think that they were as much surprised, because they knew, I think they know their child, and how much I've always wanted to just go, right? Go travel and be somewhere else. But I think a lot of maybe my peers, and a lot of other people, because again, you come to America for the American dream, which is very much real. I think, when people kind of, America, it has lots of issues and lots of problems, but opportunity to change trajectory for generations of people, by someone immigrating here as a young person, that's undoubtable, right? Um, and so, it's kind of like, how can you leave that? Or there's that mindset versus, I'm like, well, that just because you leave doesn't mean you can't come back.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Doesn't mean it's not like I'm not giving up my passport. I'm not, but I think there can be this underlay of like, how dare you turn your back on America? Or even though it's not turning your back on America, you're just away for whatever period of time. Still identify as a US citizen, very proud, etc. But and I think, but that's just kind of speaking to how things are just changing worldwide, and the global economy and all the rest of it, versus before things were more just one way, right? You go, that's it. I mean, when my parents moved to Nigeria, that was it. That was the plan. There was no, this whole back and forth thing was not a thing.
Mm.
Um, and so I think, those of us, in this generation, like we're growing up, kind of hearing those stories and that life and that gratitude, this sense of gratitude of, they've allowed you to come here and should be grateful and work
Mm.
hard. And we do all those things, but you're not prisoned here either, right? You take advantage of said freedoms and flex, like that is the American dream, to be able to
Mm.
leave and live in Portugal, to live in Barbados, to wherever it is. Those are all part of, back to Nigeria, in India, where that is the American dream, that flexibility and that freedom.
Mm.
And so I think that's definitely something that I've have learned, and has been really clear to me during this time.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And how did it sounds like your daughters may have been like 8 and 9 when you moved. How did
Mhm.
they respond to this transition to Barbados? Um, because I know a lot of people that even think about moving abroad, one of their key concerns is how are my kids going to react? Are they going to like adjust? Okay, they're leaving their friends or their
For
family.
sure.
So I was curious how your kids responded to the move and how it's been for them. Hey, are you wondering how you too can have your own experience abroad? Then make sure to download our completely free cheat sheet that walks you through the 3 steps to kickstart your own adventure. You can download it now at hippocraticadventures.com/subscribe.
And COVID,
Mm.
right? So they were home for 2 years.
Right, right, they were.
Yeah.
Mm.
And if you think about it too, like I said, 8 and 9, they literally, I think the first one had just finished second grade or third grade, I think, when lockdown happened. I think she was in third grade. Um, and the way the school system, we actually had she started a new school in second grade, like their tag school that they got. So it starts in second grade. So she started there, and then the other one had just started essentially at the new school. So it was like they were just starting to get to know people, starting to kind of get into routine. Um, and then lockdown happened for 2 years.
Yeah.
So I guess I say that just to say, like, we hadn't, and again, my husband and I, we busy schedules, etc. Like we weren't a soccer family, 3 days a week and then swim practice. Yeah, no. uh, that was not, kudos to the moms and parents that are able to do that. But I know that that was not something that, definitely not at that age, and honestly still not now. So I think, all that background to say was that I didn't, there wasn't that sense that we were pulling them away from the strong network of friends and routine. And what was difficult was, even though, yes, we didn't have that, soccer family or whatever, my family, so my girls have pretty much grown up. I'm very fortunate that my parents and my brother's family, we all live 5 minutes from each other. And so they've probably spent more time in both those households, than in their own home, growing up with their cousins, etc. So uh, yeah, that, and yeah, like I said, my parents watching their grandkids from babies all the way up, and we know what that relationship is like with grandparents and grandkids. Um, so that was definitely a strong consideration, and something that I did worry about. But no, they loved it here. They love it here. They've when we came, again, worried because actually Barbados had even stricter COVID rules. So they were still locked down, still virtual schooling, which I was like, oh my goodness,
Yeah.
I'm gonna move my kids, right? From like, and then their school back home had finally decided to go back in person. It was just, for people that wanted, there was an option, you could do a virtual if you wanted, but they were essentially opening back. And so I remember actually even right before, because like I said, I moved in September, it was like everything was just so, you live and die with your kid's school schedule.
Right.
So it was like, we're gonna move, we have to do it now, otherwise, and I was like, we'll figure something out. So plan B was to do virtual from Barbados, to their school in the US. And while obviously looking at schools, but then the schools in Barbados were virtual. So, but thankfully we did find a school. It's how these things just work out. One of my work colleagues, there's a small private school, independent school, and so Barbados was allowing if they were able to arrange bubbles, so basically like 4 or 5 kids and a teacher in an outdoor space. And so because the school was so small and they had basically parents would offer up, yeah, patios, back porches. Actually, my kids met like at a tennis club. And like right there at the beach. Yeah, it was like, and then you go in with your laptop and the teacher, and there were like 5 kids and a teacher, and drop them off from day one. And we were really fortunate. The other family we met was another American family, actually, that had moved to Barbados just for the COVID, having COVID travel, etc. And they became really fast friends, and so that made the transition really easier for sure, for sure. I think that had a lot to do with that. Like I said, going from that initial, like, okay, we're here for 12 months, right? Which you can kind of dial down to like 9 months, really, right? With school, etc. But once we saw that they were comfortable and we were getting into a routine, it started to open up that date line a lot more.
So what made you switch from thinking that you were going to be there for 12 months to now obviously you've been there for 3 years? What happened?
I think all the things, right? Like, okay, this is not as difficult. Like it's easy. It's easy to live here.
Hmm.
And, you know, the world isn't falling down. Think once you leave, oh my God, all these things everything's gonna collapse and fail. And at least that's how, I just back home, you're just so busy I felt like I had to be the one to be there to do the things. And it was taking a toll on me. It was. We throw the term burnout all the time, and I say I wasn't burnt out, but I was definitely well done.
Hmm.
I was well done, and it wasn't just work; it was all the things. So I think having when you take such a big leap, you hold your breath for a couple months. But I don't know about you, but it's you're like you're not even telling people. You're like, yeah, we'll probably be back. Who knows, in a month or two, or whatever. And and then it takes a while to breathe, and then you look and you assess, and it's working.
Yeah.
You know, it's actually working. I don't know, and I think. Like I don't, you asked me how long at the time, how long did I don't know, but I'm like, this is working for now. So let's keep doing it.
That sounds so familiar because when we moved here originally, I was to my friends and family, I was like, oh, I
Yeah.
think, we'll see how the year goes. We'll see how the transition is. But in the back of my mind, I was like, I think we may stay here for longer. And over time, you're just like, okay, I can adapt to this lifestyle. You make the transition. You see how you're like the kids are adapting really well. And slowly you're like, well, this kind of feels good to me. Like it feels good to me now. So let's just keep going. And then that's how 1 year turns into 3 years or 4 years. So that's wonderful. Any
How
advice?
long have you guys been in Portugal?
So it's so interesting. I feel like our stories are really parallel. We moved in August 2020, so it was in the middle of the pandemic. People officially thought we were crazy because it was before the vaccine. And yeah, I think when we
Oh,
look back, we're like, oh my gosh, we were crazy because our kids were, my daughter was 3.5 and our son was 10 months old when we moved.
oh,
So I definitely
wow.
remember a moment on the plane, like mid-Atlantic, being like, what are we doing here? Like, why is this a one-way flight? Like, what is happening? I was like, I am officially crazy. Um, but you know what? It was just one of those decisions where we had mulled it over. It wasn't a like COVID happened and then all of a sudden we want to move somewhere.
Right.
It had been a decision that we'd been thinking about, dreaming about, fantasizing about for a long time. And it just came to the point where it was the right point in our life to kind of make that transition. And it felt like a good time. And it's interesting because you talk about being in practice for like 10 plus years when you made that transition. I think I was in practice about 5 years. So I was fresh out of fellowship, but I knew that if I kept, so it was one of those things where like I knew how my day was going to be. I knew the types of patients I was going to see. I knew I had my spiels, I had my responses, I had my like metaphors, like all of that. And I remember looking at colleagues that were 5, 10 years ahead of me. And what I
Mm.
saw were colleagues that were wonderfully compassionate, incredibly thoughtful, and they did not want to take on anything more than the minimal that was required. And it wasn't because they didn't want to help out. It wasn't because they didn't want to teach med students or whatever. I got the sense that they were just exhausted. They were just tired. And I knew that if I continued down that path, I was also going to be like that because there was no reason why I wouldn't. And so that was kind of a huge part of why we decided to kind of make this life change as well. And I went from practicing clinically like 100% in the hospital, in the clinic, like in the middle of it, to practicing now 100% non-clinical. So when I was asking you that question, I was kind of asking for myself as well. Because yeah, it's so interesting because growing up, when I thought of a doctor, I really
Mm.
envisioned someone, whoever it was, seeing patients. And they always worked in my mind in a hospital or in a clinic. That was it. There were like no other options. When I saw what my mentors were doing, where did I meet them? I met them in the hospital and in the clinic, you know. When I look at what my co-residents do, what my friends do, they're all working in those two areas. And so, yeah, it was incredibly scary to kind of move and be like, maybe I want to do something a little different with my medical degree. Can I apply it in a different way? Um, so I feel like a lot of what you're sharing really resonates with me as well.
Yeah.
So that kind of brings me to, any advice for a fellow physician who's thinking about moving abroad, who
Mm.
wants to try out an experience, any kind of wisdom, like pearls of wisdom that you would want to share with them?
Um, I think just go for it. I go for it. That, that degree, all that work that you've done is not disappearing, evaporating. It cannot be undone. And so, even if we get off, I like to call it the treadmill, right? That path, that prescribed path that we're all on from medical student all the way through pre-med school, right? Like even from
Yeah.
university, like you're doing the things, the community service, the shadowing, the
And
grades, all.
chemistry, right?
It's just, you just like, this is the prescription, you follow it and you get this result, which
Yeah.
it's good, it works, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, once you've gotten it, so you've achieved it, um and then continue to work and do that, which is good. But if you want to see what else is out there, I think that's great as well. And again, I'm family medicine, so not like super surgical or anything like that. And I think there's, with folks that do have those skills, there's fear of, if you haven't, for not doing it for, I don't know, whatever length of time. I've heard a year or 2 years. I don't know, but so, but still, it's not 6 months,
Yeah.
right? So if did something for 6 months, 9 months, even up to a year, I don't think there's even the most rigorous place, I don't think will say, like, how dare you not? So I would say to go for it. And worst case, you go back to the hospital, clinic, whatever, which is also completely fine.
Yeah, one of my colleagues, when I was leaving, I was sharing with her, I'm afraid of leaving. Like, this is all I know. All I know is the hospital and clinic. And she told me, Ashwini, you are young, go explore, go out there, because guess what? Traditional medicine will always be there for you and you can always come back. And I thought that was just like such a great kind of perspective to offer as well. Because like you said, like we are lucky that the US, like you can still go back to the US,
Yeah,
right? If
yeah.
you realize, okay, I'm good for now. I did what I explored, I had a challenge.
Mhm.
Now I kind of want to go back to what I knew or like use what I've learned and apply it in the US. Awesome.
Exactly.
Amazing. Um,
Those are exactly. And it's not failure either way. Like you don't, I, you know, and I think maybe those of us in medicine, just because it's so prescriptive, it almost, you don't want to lose. I work with med students now, right? I don't want to lose it a month, a semester, or whatever, right? To quote unquote backstep, or it's always this forward motion, forward trajectory. Um, but once you get there, after the fellowships and the sub-fellowships and and you feel really good, your parking spot, all of that. Like that's it. Like you just I don't know, keep working, keep publishing, whatever it is, but you know, you take whatever opportunities. And so I'm now at that point, I'm open. I think I still, just like you mentioned, struggle with what's a doctor and that person in my mind. You're right. I still see when I say doctor, I'm kind of getting to the point where I'm like, I need to keep laying up the hands
yeah.
and so I still keep up my license and I still go back and see patients and I have to
Yeah.
at this point, it's important for me. And kind of what I think, and I think in my role too as a teacher, that's important to still stay clinically active, and just to talk the talk. Um, but I will say one of the things, also that helped was this fear of leaving and everything falling apart, and my staff who have been incredibly supportive, loyal, like they've been with me from the beginning, basically grew up together. And
Mhm.
I'm like, yeah, go,
Mhm.
do what you need to do. And I mean, we'll miss you and a lot because we know what you do and the value that you hold. But at the same time, we want you to be happy and to be good, which um really, really humbling. Um, really, really humbling. I think when the people that because I'm like, I'm doing all of this for you, right? I'm staying here and
Mhm.
working and putting in the hours and trying to make everything right because I know it's not just about me, it's about,
Yeah.
my staff and making sure that we can make payroll, we can provide a healthy, safe environment to work in. And obviously my patients got to have
Yeah.
to be here, to have the door open for you to get care to do. But yeah, they'll be okay.
Yeah.
Right? Like you don't have to, I guess, message to the other doctors. It's not all on you.
Mm.
You, right? I think we put ourselves in that position, and society also helps with that. Put
Yeah.
ourselves in that place where we feel like we're this smart, you have to do all the things and be all the things and the smart, the captain and going down with the ship. And I mean, I don't know. No one rewards that. Like it's not. I mean, you may have more cards at your funeral or something, but that's
Mm.
pretty much it,
Yeah.
you know? So, you gotta take care of you.
Yeah.
Yeah, you gotta
I
take
think
care of you for sure.
I think that's great advice. So Dr. Adora Otiji, thank you so much for joining us, for sharing your time, for more importantly, sharing your story with us. I know this is going to resonate with so many people listening. So thank you so much for being on here. And I hope your students at Ross also watch this. So when it comes out, we'll send you the link, and please do share, because I think that'll be super cool for them to hear your backstory as well.
Or not. Not kidding.
Or not, or you don't have to.
Yeah, no, but to your point, right? It's important for, I agree, so students, and I think there's under-recognized, there are other ways to be a doctor, like, or multiple ways to be a doctor, not other ways, or just multiple ways to live your life as a doctor. And you can go in, like, yes, I 100% agree, right? Different ways of doing it all at the same time or not. So
Well, thank you so much. And with that, we are wrapping up another episode of Discovering Where Your White Coat Can Take You. So for those of you who are listening, make sure to like, subscribe, and share this with a colleague or friend, because this really helps us reach more physicians who want to move abroad, who want a different experience, and just don't know how to do that.